Hello everyone, this is Shannon from That's So Po, and today I wanted to do a discussion about the book Sal and Gabi Break the Universe by Carlos Hernandez and talk about why we need more middle grade like this. So Sal and Gabi is a book that when I first heard about it, I wasn't sure if it was going to be for me. It is part of the Riordan Presents line, and I had tried to read as an adult The Lightning Thief, which is the first book in the Percy Jackson series by Riordan, a couple of years ago, and it was too young for me. It felt very juvenile, and the humor was just a little too silly, too annoying. I didn't really get along with it, and so I wasn't so sure what to think about this Riordan Presents line. I'd heard that some of the series within this line also follow a very similar style and a very similar humor, and I just wasn't sure that that was what I was into. But I had heard so many good things about this book. In particular, Diana at BookishDi, who I will link below, had really strongly recommended this. She'd done a standalone review, again, I'll link that below, and it just sounded like this book was something special. So when I heard her talking about it, I heard other people talking about it, I thought, you know what, let me give this one a try. And I'm so glad I did, because this represents in so many different ways exactly what I'm looking for in middle grade. So first, let me give a summary of the story. In this story, Sal is a recent transplant to Miami, and he starts at a fine arts school, which is absolutely perfect because he is a magician. He loves sleight of hand and all sorts of magic tricks. Also, he can do real magic. He can reach through to other universes in the multiverse and bring things from those universes back into his world. However, this does have some issues. Sometimes he ends up leaving holes in between, which is definitely a problem. There is another student, Gabi, who is so wonderful. She is the student council president, she is the newspaper editor, all sorts of things, and she sees it as her business to uncover what's going on with Sal and the things that he's doing, because she thinks that those magic tricks don't check out. And they start out with this kind of antagonistic relationship where she's questioning him, but that quickly turns into such a wonderful and deep friendship. And this book follows them on their sort of exploration and romp through dealing with some of these issues that Sal has created, and also just a lot of friendship and growth. It is such a beautiful story, so much fun. So now I want to go into all of the different aspects, different facets of this story that I thought were so fantastic and that I would love to see more middle grade do. The first is actually the humor. I'm very picky about my humor, but I loved the way that the humor was done in this book. It had all sorts of humor. It had the sort of slapstick humor that I think kids like. Not so much my style, but definitely it was done well. It also had a lot of sort of surrealist, absurdist humor where just these ridiculous situations with people acting seriously in them made, I don't know, so much sense, but it made it very funny. I also just liked there's a lot of wit and a lot of understated humor and a lot of amusement at the ridiculousness of life. There's so much humor threaded throughout this. I found myself constantly laughing, which is a very good sign and I think an excellent thing for a middle grade. Another aspect of this book that I think really helped balance the humor was the depth and seriousness of the topics that it addressed. I really like it when middle grade books address important topics and issues. I think that this book actually addressed a ton of very heavy issues, things like death and illness and bullying and abuse, and it did it with a seriousness that was balanced by the humor, and it made it very easy to read through this, to care about the characters, to care about the issues that they were dealing with without feeling overwhelmed and hopeless. And I just loved the way that the book showed the characters trying to deal with these issues, often making wrong choices or making mistakes or not handling it well, often figuring out how to handle it better, getting advice from other people, getting help, and just growing and learning and managing these very tough situations and feelings in really healthy ways. Another topic that I think this book handled beautifully is that of disability representation. And it handled it wonderfully, not just for a middle grade, but for any novel or any media in general. Often disability representation is done in such a way that is very disempowering for the character, or is done simply as a motivation for something rather than representing just that experience of having some disability that needs to be dealt with. There is an excellent magazine issue, Uncanny magazine issue 24, Disabled People Destroy Science Fiction. I did a standalone review of this, so I will link it below if you'd like to know more. But that had so many essays in it where different authors talked about what they want to see in terms of disability representation. And one of the big themes of that was that people who have disabilities want to see themselves as the heroes of the story. And they don't want their disability to be something that needs to be fixed. They want it to just be a part of who they are. And I loved that in Sal and Gabi, this is exactly the way that it was handled. Sal has type 1 diabetes, and this is definitely a big part of his life. He has to take insulin. He has to monitor his blood sugar. He has to think carefully about, can he have all of those carbs? Does he have to make a choice between having some yuca and having some rice? He has so many things in his life that he just has to accommodate those differences in. And I love that it's just that accommodation. It doesn't make him less powerful. It doesn't make him weak. It doesn't make him an object of pity. It's just simply something he has to deal with in life, and that affects his actions but doesn't limit him. And I really, really loved that. I also really loved the discussion of how it's important for accommodations to be made. Things like he gets in trouble because he has Skittles during PE and the teacher doesn't understand. And they have a whole conversation at the school about how basically they need to be more educated about the needs of kids who have diabetes and other disabilities. And I loved that. I thought that was so, so beautiful. So I just thought that the representation of disability in this was really strong and powerful and empowering. And it just focused on a character who happens to have a disability, and that's not the point of the story. It's just who he is. And I loved it. It was so beautiful. Another type of representation that I thought was done really well in this book was that of various family structures. I really liked that each of the different characters had different types of family structures. So Sal has a stepmom and they have a very positive relationship. Gabi has a mom and multiple different dads. And I loved the way that those relationships and those family structures were discussed as just how it is for their families. And there's so much acceptance and so much kind of role modeling of how to deal with learning about other people's family structures and just kind of accepting it for what it is. And I really liked that modeling as well. Speaking of modeling, I loved the way that non-toxic masculinity was modeled in this book. Sal is such a troublemaker. He's constantly being reckless and acting without thinking and doing things kind of just because he feels like it, but he's so good at taking responsibility for it. He's so good about acknowledging when he's done something wrong, about apologizing, about showing sincere regret and remorse if he's done something to hurt someone, about caring about other people's feelings, about respecting them, about being vulnerable as well and sharing, what maybe caused him to act out. And it's just so beautiful that he's not a perfect character, but he owns up to his mistakes and he cares about other characters and their feelings. And he really models how to not be afraid of your own ego being pierced and how to care about other people's feelings and share your feelings. I just really liked the way that he modeled that non-toxic masculinity. Yet another thing that I thought was modeled beautifully in this story was how to ask for help, how to accept help, and how to offer help. So much of this story is centered around friends and family coming together and helping each other. It's about people who, when they're facing some sort of struggle, reach out. They ask for help. If there's somebody who is in trouble and they don't ask for help, the other people come and they say, do you need help? Can we help? There's so much in this about how to ask for help, how to accept it, and how to offer it. There's many characters in this who don't know what to do when they're in a bad situation. And there's discussions of things like meditation, about getting therapy. Sal has been through therapy and he talks about that. He talks about how to work through emotions. He's not perfect at it, but he knows that he needs to. He tries it. He explains how to do it to other people. And there's so much in this about supporting each other and just being there to help that I thought was modeled beautifully. And the last thing that I really loved about this book was the way that it explored the experience of a different culture. So in this book, almost all of the characters are Cuban American, and I really, really liked the way that that was integrated into the story. There's so much in here about Cuban American culture, about the family structures, about what's important. There's so much in here about food, so much not just about what the food is, but what the food means. Things like feeding someone is a way that people show love, and having these big gatherings with so much food is a way to share in community and care about each other. There's stuff about dancing, there's stuff about spirituality, there's stuff about beliefs, so many things in here about Cuban American culture. I loved that aspect of it. I also really liked the representation of the sort of immigrant experience in terms of language. So Sal is somebody who understands some Spanish, but definitely isn't perfect. But there's other characters in here who maybe understand only Spanish and not English. They speak in Spanish. There's some other characters who have very limited Spanish. Often Sal acts as sort of a mini translator to, with his imperfect Spanish, translate what the characters who are speaking in Spanish are saying to some of the characters who don't quite understand. I also liked the way that Spanish was used in this, where it wasn't translated word for word, but you were expected to understand from the context, and maybe there would be a little bit of translation or a little bit of commentary, but it wasn't a one-to-one ratio. And I really liked that integration of Spanish into the book. I thought it was such a great feel of what that experience is like for these kids, and it was just really, really beautiful. So overall, I think that Sal and Gabi Break the Universe is such a fantastic example of exactly the kind of middle grade fiction that I want to see. I loved all of the magic and the wonder and the fantastical elements. I loved the humor, but also the heart and the depth of the experiences that it explores. I love the representation and the modeling and just so many things about this book, as well as it just being such a fun read. So if you have read Sal and Gabi, definitely let me know down in the comments below what you thought, or if you've read any other middle grade that you think is similar to this, that does a great job of representing different experiences, that is fun to read but has all of that heart to it. Let me know. I'd love to hear your recommendations.